Welcome aboard to the Captain Crypto Show. Today, join the Pirates Parley, where the captain sits down with the industry's movers and shakers as they share stories from their journey and discuss their upcoming adventures. Here's your host, Kylan Hurt.
Alright, all you Buccaneers. For those of you who don't know, the Captain Crypto Show, including the Captain's Council and the Pirates Parley, as well as the regular Voyage episodes, are recorded here in San Diego. So with that said, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Christopher Groshong. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Hey, Kylan. You can call me Chris.
Okay, Chris. For those of you who are not familiar with cryptocurrency within the San Diego region, Chris is the main Bitcoin Meetup organizer for the official meetup. He's also one of the core organizers for the Ethereum Meetup. And in addition to that, he's also the owner of a cryptocurrency consulting company by the name of Coinstructive. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Chris. So you've definitely been doing an excellent job of helping to nourish the local cryptocurrency community. And for me, as someone who regularly attends your events, which are often held and hosted here at the Edge, formerly Airbit's office, one of the things that comes to mind, obviously you do excellent work. So I'm kind of curious, how did you get involved with the official Bitcoin and Ethereum meetups within San Diego? What's the story behind that? And what's the time frame of that when you first started really becoming the main organizer for these meetups?
That's a great question, Kylan. So I really got involved with Bitcoin in 2013, and I said to myself, all right, well, there has to be a way to get involved with the community and find out who's who in the space.
What year was this?
2013 was when I first started digging in really hard.
Going all in.
Yeah, into Bitcoin.
Right.
And so I just said, okay, 2014 rolling around, and I was tired of just talking to people on Twitter and the internet through Reddit and stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start going out and actually trying to meet people.
The real life, the real world?
Yeah, the real world people. And so I said, all right, I'm going to look for a meetup group, because I was already part of a meetup group for scuba diving, and that turned out to be really beneficial.
Right.
So I was like, all right, well, let's go hang out with some like-minded people. And I went to a coffee shop. Actually, it was a kava bar. So we hung out.
Sounds like something that Paul would be at.
Yes. And so I met a few people, and then somebody that I knew through Twitter, Michelle Seven, said, you guys should, who was Bitcoin Belle at the time.
Right. So does she live in San Diego?
No, she just knows everybody.
Yeah. Well, she's been around for a long time. I'm actually familiar with her.
Yeah. So she said, you need to go talk to Paul Pui. And I said, okay, I will go talk to him, because obviously he's running a wallet here in town, and I like what they're doing. So we met up. He lived their office was about a mile away from where I lived. So we went and had some tacos and at City Tacos in San Diego that accepts Bitcoin for the food payments there. And we spent about an hour chit-chatting, and I was as green as you could possibly be. I knew I wanted to be in the space, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And he goes, well, we're going to be going to a conference in the next couple of weeks up in San Francisco. You should come with us and just hang out. And I was like, oh, cool. My family's from the Bay Area. I grew up there. I'll have a place to stay, and I can go and check it out. So Paul introduced me to a bunch of people. And at the time, the Bitcoin Meetup, this was June 2014, right? So the Bitcoin Meetup group had already been established. And there was Paul and about 3 other people who were helping organize the meetup.
Were they holding it here at the Edge office at the time, or?
So the Edge office.
Well, I guess it was a different office, right?
It wasn't here. It wasn't in the gas lamp. It was up in the North Park area at a co-work space, essentially. So that's why I was able to meet some of the people from the meetup around that neighborhood, because that's where Paul was, which was kind of the epicenter. So wherever Paul goes seems to
funny how that works.
The community has followed, which is great, because he's really brought some of that voice to the community from his perspective of the core functionality of what Bitcoin is supposed to be and the principles behind sovereignty. So it resonated with me a lot, and I felt like there was definitely this was definitely a person that I wanted to know better and be involved with in the community. And so as Airbits was growing, it came to a point, I think it was like, I want to say end of 2014. So about 6 months after I had kind of been like hanging around, and he was like, hey, I could use some help like with running the meetups, because one of the people kind of stepped
Dropped
away.
out, right.
Yeah, and the other one didn't really want to be like a host, and so they need someone who had the personality that could stand up and not be afraid to like talk in front of people.
Right, and it takes money, and it takes a lot of time, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a component to it too. So I was lucky, and originally I had a decent day job, and I was able to afford a couple $100 a month to contribute to the group. And actually, at some points, it was only like $40, because we were only getting like 20 people.
It's just not that many people. You could just take the leftovers home, right?
I think the biggest meetup we had was like 50 or 60 people for the first Open Bazaar meetup that we had in 2015, and that was like the biggest turnout we had. Though, we were mostly about education and information and a place where people could come and connect and ask the questions that they wanted to ask, and just find other like-minded people. So that was basically the premise of the meetup group, and I would say that it's pretty much stuck to that. We've had some presenters that maybe don't always fall into the core thought process or the core ideals.
Philosophy, right?
Yeah. But for the most part, I'd say we try to do a pretty good job of vetting who we bring in, and that they're going to bring some value to and educate the community.
Right. So what is that process like when you're trying to get some of the bigger names or maybe some of the more intriguing speakers? I'm sure some speakers are trying to speak at meetups. Others take some, not schmoozing, but you kind of got to suck up to them a little bit or stroke their ego a little bit to get them to come. What is that process like usually?
That's another good question. Luckily, we have quite a bit of reputation here in San Diego for holding decent meetups that the community gets really engaged in, and like the speakers that come. I think that's probably the best recruitment that you can get, and like is that they're giving
other
us,
speakers.
Yeah, they come and they go, wow, you guys have like a really robust, like awesome community, like smart people asking good questions. People are polite. They know like when they should, be respectful and how to act in a crowd correctly, and they see the fact that we put in a lot of energy into this, and they are just really excited that people are coming out and in droves, and we're filling up the place. So hopefully we'll have to move to a bigger venue soon. I mean, no offense to Ed.
Yeah, well, San Diego does keep it classy. I guess one thing that I could see is if a potential speaker sees some other big names that have spoken at the meetup, to them might be a bit of an ego thing that they also want to be a speaker for the same group that had these other speakers. Maybe they want to be in that tier, I guess, with some of those top speakers as well. Do you see any of that at all, or not as much?
It depends on who you talk to, because some people have huge egos and some people like want to fly under the radar in this space. So if you're talking to a technical person, they may want to come and speak, but they may not really care how they're perceived, because they're more about the information only, and they don't really care about their name or they're not ego driven.
Got it. And would you say the non-ego driven tend to be the better speakers, or is there not really much of a pattern?
I feel it resonates better with the community, like in the crowd, that when people's BS meters like fly off the chart in this space, because they've seen so much of it, right? Like,
yeah.
The new people, not so much, but people who have been around for at least a year have seen so many things already that they can start to pick out a piece of crap right away and just call it for what it is. And as somebody who is trying to help bring in valuable information to the community, that's my reputation on the line too. So
for sure,
I take a with a bit of pride that I try to, I run it by Paul too. So it's not like me just blindly bringing in people, and usually get his blessing.
Yeah. So what I was thinking when you were mentioning some of those years like 2013, 2014, 2015 is the price. There were not very many altcoins at the time. Maybe Litecoin was around, Namecoin, or some of those smaller ones. A lot of them have fallen off since then. But the price of Bitcoin itself during those times, I remember it was doing pretty poorly for a good year or two in there, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean after the spike to 1,200 in end of 2013, November, early December, it was actually right around Thanksgiving, which is
right.
Kind of that it's always I always wondered if it had something to do with like Black Friday and people pumping so they could actually spend it,
right?
Because people were buying them for dollars or pennies before, and all of a sudden it was worth $1,000, and
time to cash out and buy some presents. There might be some truth to that.
I think there was for a while until until some of the bigger players have moved in, and now they're moving the needle for other reasons.
Yeah. So,
but the back to the alts, right? And
right.
In 2014, it's so crazy to me because in 2014 we saw the rise of alts that were just like you said, Litecoins, like just change an algorithm and some parameters,
right.
and boom, you're off to the races. Slap a name on it,
and everyone's buying it.
Yeah, this whole ICO thing,
kind of like another version of that.
It's the same thing, it's just on Ethereum, right? It's a little more sophisticated because there's some smart contracts involved, and but even ERC20 tokens are being replaced soon, right? With ERC223.
So, no, I didn't even know that. I was not. How different is it, do you think?
Well, it fixes some issues around the possibility of lost tokens, sending them to the wrong address or contract, and then having them just be locked up forever. Some small improvements, just like there's BIPs for Bitcoin,
right?
Improvements to the protocol. That there's these essentially changes to what's going on with Ethereum too, and just making things better.
Yeah, in general, but I guess the big question is whether it tackles that problem of accountability, right? Because that's the biggest issue I see with the tokens is there's not really anything keeping someone from just running off with them, right?
Same thing happened in 2014, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got scammed in 2014, and I guess you could say that I got lucky that I was able to grind my teeth when the price of Bitcoin was between $1,000 to $250 on its way down, right?
Yeah, you've earned your stripes.
So, and I lost quite a few Bitcoins, and I look back on it and I go, man, that sucks. But now, I'd hate to say that now, right?
When it's worth this much.
Yeah.
A few Bitcoins,
yeah,
plural.
When you're looking at an $8,000 price tag, makes a big difference. You can kind of swallow that loss a little bit different if it's $750.
Right. So I'm curious, since your role as meetup organizer is so kind of pivotal, really, if people want to get involved in the community, really the best way, I think, we were mentioning this in the last episode, the best way is probably to get involved with the meetup. So I was really curious, how have you seen the price of Bitcoin, its prosperity, its fluctuations? How have you seen that affect the types of personalities you see in the meetups, the attendance numbers, in general, the vibe? How are those two interrelated from your vantage point?
Yeah, over the course of the years, you've seen, large amounts of people. Like I said, we only had 60 people in a smaller place before, but that to me was quite a bit when you're looking at, early 2015.
Right.
And when you look at the class of people based on the price. So if the price hits $1,000, you're going to get people crawling out from all over the place to find out how they can get a piece of this because they heard the thing was $200 before.
Right.
And now that the price is at, when it went over $3,000, you got the same effect. It was in mainstream media. People were kind of waking up to it, and there's always this allure in anything that's finance related of how can I make money too?
Right. Especially if you can make it quickly. When they're seeing returns tenfold in a year, you have to be asleep not to be paying attention to that, right?
For the most part, yeah. I think that it's very enticing to a lot of people. People are always attracted to easy money, and that's why there's always scams that will be around, cryptocurrencies because it's just there are evil people, and evil people prey on the innocence of and the general morality of good people and their naivety. So there's tons of money to be made in this industry, which means there's going to be a ton of scams.
Right.
So people have to, that's why we say come out, and we try to give like 30 minutes at least before any presenters so that people can grab a beverage, an adult beverage if they want.
Yeah,
And,
we have fun at the San Diego meetups.
well, I mean, we are a brew capital of the world, right? So
That's right.
Beer drinkers unite.
You got a lot of libertarian types too who know they are willing to have fun, I suppose. They're a little more, I can't say liberal, classically liberal, I should say.
Yes. And, right across the border in Tijuana, there's a meetup group as well. And I know that one of the founders of that group he comes over here and attends our meetups.
Yeah, what's his name, just out of curiosity?
Ricardo.
Ricardo.
Yeah.
I don't know if I recognize him, but that's cool. Have you ever gone to any of their meetups then yourself?
No, I have not been down there yet.
Got it. Yeah, it's been decades since I've been to Tijuana, but I hear a lot of good things. And some of my coworkers live down there, and obviously a lot of the meetup members live there as well. So it's actually, from what I understand, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, the hipster revolution is taking over everywhere. So
Even taking hold in Tijuana.
yes, absolutely. So I think when you look at just overall the expansion of the meetup, now you're getting a more sophisticated user that's coming to the meetup, and you're still getting really green people. Like we ask, some basic questions around the group, like, hey, who here has Bitcoin? Who here has cryptocurrency? Who's, participated in an ICO? Who has Ethereum? Just to kind of see, like, how many people have tried mining. Like you get this variation of all these different types of people who are interested for different reasons. So, I had a meeting today, and this all kind of stems from being a part of the meetup. Is it allows you to get out in front of the community and become a resource for people and a go-to person.
Right.
So fortunately for me, Paul wanted to kind of take more of a back seat and focus on his company. And as I was trying to launch my consultancy, I felt like it was a good time to kind of take on that extra responsibility, go and be able to meet and greet people. And then you kind of have that as your like touch point into like the community, as far as like how you can reach out to people and get their feedback from exactly what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and they become more familiar with you as well, which I think, and that's an excellent segue into your work at Coinstructive, is when they become more familiar with you and they see the quality of work that you do with the meetups. I would think, if someone's looking for some sort of consulting help within cryptocurrency, if they know that you do it, they already know your name, they already know what you look like. It's probably pretty easy for them to refer someone to you, right?
I would hope so. It's one of the reasons that we do it. And one thing I want to get back to before we move on too much is the meetup. If someone's looking to get like involved with their local meetup, the best thing that you can do is go talk to the meetup organizer and ask if there's anything that you can do to volunteer. Because I guarantee you, as like I get busier, that I'm not going to be able to attend one of these, right? Like the last one, I actually got lucky and I was able to fly back from New York before I went to LA, and the one day that I was back was the night of the meetup.
Right.
So, but there might be a time where I'm gone for a week and I won't be able to make it. So I'm going to need somebody else who can kind of front run that and be able to take that over.
Right, and that for some of the listeners out there, if you're hearing this, obviously that's an opportunity. If you're not the organizer yourself, definitely helping the organizer is a way to kind of work your way up within the community, and you can learn more as you are working your way up. So I'm kind of curious, were any of the other organizers or co-organizers when you first came in, are any of them still around as kind of organizers or fixtures within the local community at all?
So one of them still helps run. So we do 2 meetups a month, right? We do one at a coffee shop or bakery type thing that allows people to just have a more open, casual experience and there's no real structure to it. It's just kind of hanging
so
out.
No main speaker.
Yeah, no main speaker. And then we do one where we provide snacks and beverages and allow people to come and meet people in the community that are creating things. And so we kind of try to give two different perspectives of the community and allow people to interact in two different ways.
Okay, so I think that's enough on the meetups. If anyone wants to learn more about the meetups, just go to meetup.com, look up Bitcoin, cryptocurrency in your area, see if there are any groups, I guess meetup groups for cryptocurrency. Additionally, I mean, while I have you here, if you are doing constructive things within the cryptocurrency space and you sound like the type of speaker that Chris is looking for, look up Chris Groshong, I guess on LinkedIn. Where else can they find you? Twitter?
Facebook. I'm at DJ Kinkle on Twitter. That's DJ Kinkle. That's
Were you actually a DJ at some point?
In college, I used to
spin.
I used to use actual records and spin the wax. So
there you go. So if you think you'd be a good presenter, maybe hit up Chris, but try not to waste his time either, because as you heard, he is a very busy man.
You definitely bring something to the table if you're going to talk to your local organizer about if you don't have a exact plan and just say, hey, I'm here to help whenever I can. That's great too. But if you can say like, hey, I've been working on this like 5-minute explanation of a certain topic that you think would be beneficial to the community, then your organizer might be like, awesome, before the next speaker, like we'll fit you in as an educational piece so that's like something that I've been thinking about trying to do for this meetup, to kind of extend more of an informational aspect to the group.
Right.
So yeah, come with your own ideas and like make that easier for the organizer.
Yeah, absolutely, because the presentation itself reflects on the organizer. Okay, so that's enough on the meetup. I've been very curious about what kind of work you've been doing at Coinstructive. So I guess you probably founded it, about 2013, 2014, or maybe late 2014, or about what time was that, do you think?
January 2015, right when I got back from a little hiatus that I had taken and I owed myself, and I felt really refreshed and organized and focused on a way that I could try to create a bridge for myself and
to
others.
Come into this full time, because before that you were not working full time in the industry, right?
No, it was a passion, right? And
right.
I was like, okay, I know that this is the future,
the holy grail,
and I wasn't going to miss out on it. To me, it was the second coming of the internet, and I had a path in it was my sophomore year in high school, which was about 1994, and I was like, okay, the internet or the Human Genome Project, because I really loved the biosciences.
Right.
So I chose what I thought would be a more stable path and something that I was really fascinated with in genetics. And I was going to take that route because I felt like medicine was going to change the world.
Right.
And genetics was going to be the forefront of that. So I did that for like 20 years, basically.
Right.
And when I came across crypto, I was like, Bitcoin, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is like a second chance to get on like the internet boom. And when I realized you can't shut this stuff off, and it's going to
kind of unstoppable.
Yeah, it's the Amazon model, right? It's the race to the bottom as far as like efficiency and price savings.
Right.
And so eventually everybody will be doing it, right? And
right.
We'll see like the Charles Schwabs and the Merrill Lynches and the E-Trades, and they went from $9.99 a trade to $7.99 a trade to $4.99 a trade or whatever, and then it'll be like 99 cents a trade, and you're like, how are they doing that? It's because they're using blockchain technology, and it's super fast and efficient, and cuts down on a lot of overhead.
Yeah, so I'm curious, just to back you up a little bit. So were you actually getting tired of the genetics job, or was it something that you enjoyed just not as much as cryptocurrency?
It was partly a life choice that I had taken myself down, and I was a heavy drinker for a long time. And so I kind of found myself complacent in my job and wasn't really an active member in my own life. I was kind of just like hanging out,
show up,
working, and drinking. Those were my two things in life. So once I got sober, I was like, well, I needed to do other stuff with my time. So luckily that was 2010. And like all those things like it just started coinciding, right? And so I
Right.
started getting healthier, and I started taking more of an active role in my own life, and then I started learning about finance and Bitcoin. Like, so out of sobriety, you're kind of like awakening again, right? Because you've been in this fog, and you're really not yourself. And so I started to like realize like I had all these feelings and passions inside that I've just basically had drowned, right?
Right.
Or drowned. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to let that happen again. I need to be able to
Find a way to embrace them.
and go after what I'm passionate about. And so once I started learning about how money actually works and the Federal Reserve, and I was just like, oh my gosh, how come no one's explained this to me before? How come they don't teach this in school? Like, we're living this giant scam.
Yeah, and I'm not in disagreement there. So I'm curious then, do you remember specifically like the first time you heard Bitcoin mentioned? Like where were you? What date or year was it?
So in 2012, my good friend who was a libertarian / conspiracy theorist.
I think that's redundant. I think those are pretty much the same thing in my experience.
He had a friend who was super involved and had a bunch of Bitcoin, and I was like, well, this is not the right time for me to dig in. I'm trying to start my video production business. I'm part of the way in, and I wanted to give it as much energy as I could. Plus, there wasn't really like any articles, or there was no CoinDesk or Cointelegraph to like go read articles.
Keep up to date. There wasn't too much news, to be honest.
There was
right?
like nothing. It was like people on the internet, on like Twitter and Reddit posts and Bitcoin Talk forum, and that was pretty much it. There was no mainstream media or media really in general. So I left it alone, and then I revisited it at the end of 2012, and I was like, okay, I went through the natural progression like most people do. I don't get it. I do understand, though, that if you plug in a miner, you can get like free money out of the wall basically by plugging in, right? And like you see that from a lot of people. They're like, oh, wait, it's like free money. Just plug in a
how
machine.
do I set up a miner? It's like, well, you can try. It's easier said than done.
Right. So I ended up buying, I was going to buy a Butterfly Labs miner, right?
Probably glad you didn't.
Well, yeah, I am glad I didn't. And I had waited a couple weeks, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger on that one that I had saw, and it was like $650. And then I went back after 2 weeks, and it was $1,200.
Right.
The same machine.
Right.
I go, wait a minute.
What's going on here?
I gotta learn about this. Why is this? Then I started mining with my graphics card on my computer at home for a little bit. And
What was that experience like? Like, how long were you doing it for? Are you still doing it?
No, that lasted about a month or so, intermittently. I did it on my Mac Pro.
There were mining pools at
Tower.
the time, yes?
Yeah, there were mining pools at the time.
Do you remember roughly how many Bitcoin at that time you ended up getting total?
Oh,
Part of one?
I mean, less. I think it was like 0.01
Oh, man.
or less.
Got it.
That my graphics card was not. It was part of the computer. It was a couple years old already.
Right.
So it wasn't really designed for that purpose. But it was enough to like get my feet wet.
Yeah, you learned about mining, right?
Yeah, and I realized that it is intense. It's very intense because all of your livelihood is based on those machines being up and running.
Right.
And if the machine goes down, your return on investment is like hugely
Plummets,
impacted
right.
because as difficulty goes up every 2 weeks or so, you're just losing your income or your ROI every time the difficulty goes up. So you really kind of have to go over the top on like checking these things and making sure that they're running, and if the hash power drops, like you're like wondering why, and then trying to reboot, and all of a sudden it starts to like be obsessive.
Right.
And I was like, this is way too, I should have just bought Bitcoin and like just sat on it. So I ended up breaking even to what I thought I was going to do, as far as the amount of Bitcoins that I was going to get from mining when I ended up buying a Cointerra miner in 2013.
Are they still around?
No, I think that was a one-time shot. But I mean, the machine worked. Half of one of the ASICs out of the two ASICs fried out, and it was going to cost like $300 to fix. And this was, as the time, the price was, $300-$400. And so we mined for 8 months, I think.
So you were probably working from home a lot during that time period then, right? So you could kind of oversee the machines as much as possible?
So I'm actually really glad that I didn't do that. I sent it to a hosting facility in Washington State where the power was a third.
Cheapest in the States, I think, right?
One of
Eastern Washington, I think.
Yep. And so for the same price that I was going to be able to run the whole thing for 6 months, I was going to be able to run it for a year. So I paid for the year, and it really kind of fizzled out after about 8 or 9 months.
So they have a guy like a technician there or something that, do you have to pay separately when he's working on your machine, or is it included?
It was all included, but they're not in business anymore.
Why do you think that is? Do they?
I don't know. I don't know if it was they wanted to move on to other things, or they just were like, this is too much work.
Right. What was the name? Do you remember the name of the project?
It was called Hashplex.
Hashplex. I'll have to take a look into that at some point.
They had an article. I think they got some funding originally. One of the guys was from Stanford, I believe, and they were one of the first hosted mining facilities. And so my Cointerra machine was the first Cointerra machine that they had received. So I had it shipped directly from Austin directly to Washington State, so I didn't have to pay any taxes for receiving it.
Didn't have to do anything, yeah.
And I didn't have to hear the fans or deal with the heat or the electricity bill.
Right.
Everything was taken care of.
Yeah, I think everyone that has been in cryptocurrency for long enough, I feel like they all go through that phase where it's like, oh, well, like I can only make so much money and buy cryptocurrency. Like, wait, how do I just get more of them, right? Instead of having to buy them, like, oh, mining, let me look into this mining thing. And I think it still can be profitable if you're doing it right. But like you said, it's one of those things that I could just see it consuming so much time at this point.
Yeah, it can overwhelm you and drive you insane.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, at that point, you're probably already starting to attend the meetups at that point, do you think?
Yeah. So I think that was right around the time, end of 2013, where I was like, okay, I need to start to go meet people, because I remember that was like, I'm going to be buying a miner, and everyone was like, ugh.
Yeah. Why do you think it was? Because they had already gone through that process, maybe, or they knew how.
I think some of them already knew, like, that it was, potentially a bad return on investment. And after you'd already seen what happened with Butterfly Labs, and now we're like a year later, I think people were just had gotten a bad taste in their mouth, and they'd rather just buy graphics cards and mine at home as opposed to trust a company to build it for you, because there was a lot at that time of overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah,
and
delays.
When you get a 2-month delay on a miner,
that's ridiculous.
And you're calculating your hash power and based on the difficulty that you're at, and how much you're going to make. If you're off by a month, you may lose. That's your front end is where you make all your money.
Right.
So, if you could be missing out on 2 Bitcoins in the first month, and then anything after that, it starts to go
a fraction of it.
It starts to go down significantly. So,
yeah, and I think with Butterfly Labs, didn't they find out that they said they were testing the machines, but really they were just mining with them?
Yeah, they were mining on them before they would release them.
Oh, so, man. Yeah. You always have to wonder if people that do those sorts of, I'm going to call it a scam. Maybe other people won't, but you do have to wonder if those, like, what happens after they exit with a scam like that? Do they, like, Mark Karpelis is trying to come back into the industry, I think, maybe. But, like, do you think they all exit cryptocurrency for good, or do they make their way back in?
I'm sure they're all working on other things.
Change.
I mean,
other things within cryptocurrency.
Other things within crypto. I mean, I think this is
make up a
industry.
Nickname. Yeah, they make up a new nickname and change their hair, stop shaving.
Well, I don't know how many of them had their names that were publicly attached to the company, so that people even knew that. I mean, you just don't put it on your resume, right? I mean, these were guys that probably were doing it on the side anyway, so they probably had day jobs.
Right.
So all those people, I would imagine, because they probably split some of the profits or whatever, but they have moved on to other things within the crypto space because it's too lucrative not to be.
Right.
And if they're
they have, at that point, they have expertise as well. Lots of expertise, right?
Yep.
So I'm curious then, so you're at this point, let's say you've exited the mining project of yours, And you were going to the meetups, and then what is the process? I know you said earlier that you had thought, okay, you were passionate enough about it that maybe you were trying to make the transition to full-time cryptocurrency. So what was the beginning of those sorts of steps? When did you kind of get that seed in your mind planted? Was that early on? And what kind of initiative did you take to start putting the plan in motion?
So the first step was I need to go and be around more of these people. So I need to start going to events. And for a while, I mean, look, with any event, there's going to be good and bad. There's hype events, and then there's real events where you're going to learn something. And so I was trying to be picky and choosy about which ones I would go to. And so I would, and I would find out to see like which. I'd run stuff by Paul. I would say, hey, Paul, do you think this one's a good one to go to? Are you guys going to be going to this one? And some of them I just didn't have the budget to go to.
Yeah, I was about to say it's pretty expensive to keep going to a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, and so that's what I mean. I had a fairly decent job, and so I could afford to like take time off of work and go to some events here and there, but not like people who are on the circuit trying to like pitch their businesses, right? So my thought was, okay, well, what do I want to do in this space? Well, I know that there is this huge gap in education between what engineers are talking about and what layman understands.
Right.
And that's going to cross over into multiple industries because this is going to touch everybody. So I figured, all right, well, let's start with education and work around merchant adoption. Because at the time, merchant adoption was a big topic. And so I said, okay, let's do merchant adoption. And then I realized after about 8 months, there is going to be no way to make money in this industry doing merchant adoption. So people aren't spending it because it's a deflationary currency. It's going to go up in value.
Right. So were you trying to do something like BitPay, or were you working with partners or affiliates?
I was working with some affiliates, and I was working on outreach programs and trying to drive business, and then realized that's not really the way I wanted to go. So then it turned into more of business development. I kind of had to take a step back and recalculate how I wanted to attract business in this space and where I could add the most value. So I thought, well, at the end of the day, this is still a software company, right? People are building software around Bitcoin, and the technology stack that is going to go along with that is not the only thing that you need to focus on. It's still a business, and you need to be able to run a business. And so there's, 8 to 9 out of 10 of these companies that are launching now are going to fail. And it may not be because their technology isn't good. It's because they don't know how to run a business. I mean, look what happened to Tezos recently. I mean, and they were running away with things and raised over $200 million. And then all of a sudden they like collapsed on themselves. And that's because they didn't know how to run a business properly, or didn't take the right steps to set up their business properly in the first place, or they didn't have the right people in place. So,
yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different things that can go wrong.
Well, you've seen it, right? There's a ton of things that can go wrong, and that could be anything from regulations to just bad hires, and you can put yourself in a hole real quick, or overspending. A lot of these companies were like, "Oh, this is awesome! We just got a whole bunch of money," and then they just started to blow it,
burn through it.
Mm-hmm. And the Silicon Valley, like kind of rage party that people were having when they were getting a few $1 million to start a crypto business was just kind of unheard of at the time. So there was kind of like, it still is the Wild West, but it was like really something to be seen, because there were people who were receiving this money who probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, not used to those amounts probably.
You think about it, a lot of the projects that were coming out were done by people who are really smart and almost like in an academic way. So they were not really focused on it being a business. It was more of like, let's prove the concept and let somebody else figure out how to make a business. We're just going to call it a business.
Yeah, this is funny because you probably think the same way, but it's backwards kind of.
Yeah, it is backwards.
It's more interesting to see what can make a profit, I think.
But when you're like, let's say you're a cryptographer, and you come
academic
from more
type.
academia, you write a grant and then you get some money, then you go do your project, and you don't worry about like at the end if that result is going to give you a source of income. You just do it to do it because you're curious.
Right.
And so when people started realizing, oh my God, my investment's going to disappear because these guys don't know how to run a business, it's just an idea. I'm up a creek without a paddle. So I figured, well, there's going to be a ton of businesses that they're going to need help in one way or another. And by having gone out and built connections with people who are building things in the space, I think timing is also fortuitous that in 2014, when the price was at its lowest, after a spike of over 1,200,
right.
yet that people were the only people who were still going to conferences at that time, because some conferences just completely disappeared. Like they stopped even having annual conferences because they were like,
Bitcoin is dead.
Yeah, the price is down. People are turning off their miners. You started seeing difficulty go down. Like it was a weird time.
That's strange.
And so only people who were really serious and understood what was going on, who weren't in it for the short gain, were sticking around through the lull. And so I was fortunate enough to be going to events and meeting people when people were not going to these events. And that really, I think, gave me a leg up on meeting people who are already on their like second crypto business, right? Which that we haven't been in, this industry hasn't been around that long for people to be on second and third companies already.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious then, what were some of your first, you don't have to give names or anything, but who or what were some of your first clients when you started really doing more of the consultancy part of thing, away from the actual payment and affiliate side?
Yeah, so most of that didn't really start until, that was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, was when I started to like be more active as a consultant, and what the focus became was we wanted to be able to educate like C-level type people, and executives, right? So that they had an understanding of how it applied to their business. So there's not always going to be straightforward answer. This is not a magic, Bitcoin or blockchain technology is not a magic bullet. It's not going to fix everything. If anything, it might make things more difficult. And so there's only specific use cases that you need to apply to your business. And so we wanted to make sure that people were educated enough so that they could make confident decisions on the direction that they wanted to take their business. And so I have no problem telling a client that maybe if you're in the discovery phase, that it doesn't make sense for you to use the blockchain at all.
Right. You're seeing a lot of that now. Blockchain. It's just this buzzword.
Yeah, absolutely. And so people have to be realistic that it's and understand what it really is. It's a type of ledger, and it has a specific use case or specific use cases where data does you have data integrity issues, or immutability issues, right? Where you need to know that data is not going to be corrupted in the future.
Right.
So government data is really good for things like that, and adds transparency. So it's not for everything. So I see like the business use cases now. I was working on a supply chain for a while with a company that was in building a gold-backed token and wanted to help bring transparency to human rights practices across the globe. So partnering with like the World Gold Council and things like that, so that they could drive transparency in an industry where there's a lot of not only fraud but
human rights
issues.
Right.
Yeah, right. Indentured slavery.
Right.
Where some of these smaller mines who don't have visibility, where you charge somebody $8 a day for their living and food and whatever, clothing, and they only make $6 a day. So you basically own them, and they can't get out from underneath the company's thumb, and they get stuck. And so those types of things where you can start to see more conflict-free regions and their transparency of how things are produced and distributed gives that individual the ability to, or the business owner the ability to say, I can now transact with companies who act in an ethical way. So transparency around a supply chain, right? And we already talk a lot about free trade in this world. So we think this is something that can be really helpful for a lot of people. And so that's a company that definitely needed a hand in the beginning, just sorting through the different types of technologies. So whether it's market research around what your competition would be, other competitors in the space, or the technologies that you may want to build on, because there's so many companies that are offering blockchain as, as a solution or as a software, right? And you can just, do you want to run it through, a PwC or a Hyperledger, IBM and Linux Foundation, or
PricewaterhouseCoopers? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
PwC?
they do their own blockchain stuff too.
So what are they using that for? Because I always hear these big name companies that everyone's heard of using blockchain technology, but I never really pay attention to what they're using it for. Because I'll be honest, a part of me almost doesn't care. I'm not really into the big companies. Nothing against them, but they're just not.
Well, it's only important. Yeah, I'm not a big fan either. They have misaligned incentives. So they basically have insights to almost every industry. So they start to think of it as, how can we apply these technologies across all of our different industries for all of our different customers, so it can become a new source of revenue. So what they look at it as, they can say to their customer, oh, you do X, Y, and Z, and you have a supply chain. Perfect. Let's talk about how this can be, let's build a proof of concept for you. All right, so they can turn around and sell the idea to them and then build it in-house and walk them through the process. But a lot of these things never go anywhere.
That's what it seems like.
They're just MVPs or proof of concepts, really.
Got it. Yeah, and sometimes you wonder if these big companies just want some of the positive PR that comes with essentially uttering the word blockchain.
Well, not only uttering the word blockchain, but slapping a name like Deloitte or PwC, right, or IBM.
Onto their project, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it gives them some credibility, they say.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at what you're trying to accomplish, there's plenty of companies out there that are smaller that can offer a ton of value to help you build your blockchain, if that's what you really need. Whether or not you want to pay an extra $20, $50, or $500,000 to get some large company to slap their name on the project, if it's not going to go anywhere after that, then by all means, these large companies have R&D budgets and they can spend them how they want. But when you look at like a PwC who's building an audit node, so they can give transparency to their auditors, so you can. Is that
the main service that they do at PricewaterhouseCoopers? Are they accounting, or do you know?
Yeah, they're like an accounting and auditing.
Okay, so go on.
Their whole thing is they need insight into their customers' data, because they drive reports for their customers. The other thing that they do is they are able to run their own reports on the data to data mine in the way that they want to do, right? So they can get information that they want. So, having things on a blockchain allows them to probably not have to even really ask, or they can set up the permissions ahead of time, and they can have access to pretty much whatever they want as a read-only. And if they can convince the auditor or the company that as an auditor they need to be able to see everything whenever they want, and they only have read permissions, then they don't have to go in and like pull data. Like they don't have to send somebody in to pull data, right? They can just literally be wherever they are and have that information stripped right out of the Blockchain Explorer.
Interesting. So I'm curious that as you have gotten more experience and you've met more people, and obviously as the price of cryptocurrency has been going up, I assume things have been, with regards to your consulting company, I assume things would be getting better and better along with those factors. Would you say that's correct?
I would say it is getting better, yes, because one, I've been able to leave my day job, so...
Which day job was that?
That was where I worked at Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company.
Okay, got it.
Right? And that was my biotech background. So we helped make three-dimensional protein structures for drug discovery.
Something. Where's the blockchain in there?
Yeah, right. I see the way I look at it is my background in the healthcare and pharma industry will probably tie back into that at some point.
Right. Just wait for the right opportunity.
I put a proposal in to Eli Lilly in 2015, end of 2015, early 2016 for pharmaceutical drug counterfeit using blockchain technology as a proof of concept. And the people who ran that department turned around and they said to me, we're one of the industry leaders in the counterfeit space for drugs, and we've spent millions of dollars on our process, and we're not about to change it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay,
all right.
See you later. Someone else will.
Yeah, I was about to say that these days I'm seeing so much supply chain, blockchain stuff that you would have to think they almost certainly are looking at it as a potential solution now, right?
I'm sure they are. But you know
so
how
if you're
it
out
is.
there at Eli Lilly, remember to hit up Chris Groshong in San Diego or come to one of the meetups.
Yeah, former employee. Of
And
Eli
bring
Lilly.
a big checkbook.
So, I mean, the pharma industry is just one example of where benefits can be had. And I think when you look across the board, you're going to see that it really can touch several different industries and make a significant impact across the board.
Okay, so I guess that brings up one of my other questions was there are a lot of things that bring people to cryptocurrency, and whenever I ask people what they like about cryptocurrency or blockchain technology or just the eco space in general, like kind of what was it, maybe not what was it that got you into it to begin with, but like now when you think of this whole space, what part of it is it that you like the most?
It's still the people. I like the people because they are after the truth, and there's a lot of untruths in finance, and which is one of the reasons why I got out of pharma. Was I realized that no matter how much I do, I'm still stuck behind this bureaucratic window or this curtain that's got me trapped. And Eli Lilly used to ask us for money every year to help lobby for the pharma industry,
right,
in DC.
Probably a big budget too.
Well, I mean, you got 40,000 employees.
For those of ye out there enjoying the show, your captain would love to get some feedback on how best to improve it. You can find me on Twitter as Captain Crypto HD, and on most of the high seas of social media as either Captain Crypto or Captain Crypto Show. Just be on the lookout for my logo. Also, be aware that due to the technical aspects of each platform, that my podcast feed will always have the most up-to-date and latest revisions of each episode. So, if you're enjoying this episode, feel free to give your old captain a review on iTunes and share this episode with the rest of your crew. Now, back to the show.
So every year, Eli Lilly used to ask us as individuals to contribute to their PAC for lobbying and on Capitol Hill for the pharma industry.
Yeah, big pharma.
Right. So they, as a company, they could only contribute as like an individual. So they needed all the other individuals to contribute as well so that they could make an impact.
Was there a lot of pressure? Like, oh, hey, by the way, did you...
Maybe not so much because we're not an indie. We were out here in San Diego.
Not an indie?
Indianapolis.
That's where they're based?
That's where their headquarters is, right? Middle America. and so, that just didn't sit well with me. And I knew that I had to build a way to get out of that industry. So at the root of all of that is money, right? And if money is run by the Fed and the government, and the pharma industry is run and lobbying all is tied back to the government,
right?
Then the only way that I'm going to be able to even fix the industry that I originally loved in medicine, because I thought it was going to help a bunch of people, was to fix money, right? And how money works.
It's a very central part of the society, right?
Yeah. So it really resonated with me was the people in the Bitcoin community who were fighting for good and trying to help people. And so it really, really resonated with me, and I felt like this technology is really going to help the masses. It may not happen, in year 2 or year 5 or year 10, but down the road in the future, everyone will be using this technology. They may not know it, but it'll be underlying, and it'll be helping millions of people all across the globe who didn't have access to financial monetary instruments. So when I really thought about, okay, so how can Coinstructive kind of tie in these purposes, it was all about how can we try to help. So not only are we trying to help businesses become successful, but we're also taking more of an active role in policy and lawmaking, as well as what's going on with the legal law enforcement, different groups. So a couple of different things is the Consumers Research out of Washington, D.C. puts on an event every year called Bretton Woods, which they host in New Hampshire at the Bretton Woods Resort.
That's where they used, isn't that where they had some legislation? The Bretton Woods system was like gold related, right? So it was 1944, and it was right after the World War II, where a bunch of diplomats from all different countries came to this big resort that kind of looks like the Hotel Del Coronado here in San Diego. Yeah, so it's like that time period.
Yeah. Or like a hotel from The Shining, I can imagine, right? That's kind of what it looks like. And it's really majestic. And apparently these diplomats were up there for like 19 days. It was just them, and they were just debating on how they were going to determine what currency was going to be the world reserve currency. And so they ended up with the US dollar, and it was a close race between the British pound after the war, and there was some finagling going on, and the US snuck in there and snatched it up. So there's got this history of like money policy there, and to talk about Bitcoin and
sounds haunted.
There's actually supposedly a room that's haunted, of course. Right?
The whole place.
It feels creepy. Like it does. It creaks a lot. There's like a whole floor that you can't even tell is there where the staff lives. Like,
oh my God.
It's really weird.
So you were there.
So I've been there the last 2 years, and they bring in people from all different aspects of the world and from different businesses. The UN was there. They had somebody from the World Bank this year. And this year's topic was financial inclusion. The year before that, we talked about...
was exclusion. Every year before that. No, I'm just kidding.
And the year before that, we talked about consumer protection, right? And so that's when I really liked talking about the Airbits wallet at that time because of the features that it gave to help consumers protect themselves or help protect them from themselves.
Right. That is actually one thing that I think that our apps do a good job of I'm sorry to derail, but obviously it does a good job of making sure that if you forget stuff that you're taken care of as long as you're paying attention.
Yeah, you don't have to like back up anything necessarily.
Right. And that's a big thing that's missing in cryptocurrency is that the users, a lot of them are just your average person. They don't have time to study all this stuff and hope that they do it right or they lose all their money. So you definitely need that kind of in between to have that bridge between the technical and the layman, simple swipe here, push this button.
Mm-hmm. So getting involved with them, I think, is really helpful because you kind of see how people in DC and policymakers and people who are trying to push the agenda of what cryptocurrency is and demystify things. Excuse me. I think that goes a long way in this world is trying to extend that olive branch between different communities. And then the other thing that I really liked is the Uniform Law Commission, the ULC, has worked on a bill called the Virtual Currency Business Act. And it basically is to help states come up with the same language and bill to go into law about what cryptocurrency is for each state, and so that it's uniform as opposed to like what New York did with a bit license,
right,
and then what Washington State has done. And what you don't really want is to stifle innovation, because once you stifle innovation, you see that those companies just pick up and move to a different jurisdiction, which is what happened when the bit license came out.
So I guess a big part of it is for these regulators to be able to come up with some sort of reliable, or like you said, standardized, what's the term I'm looking for?
Like definitions.
Yeah, definitions, clear
language,
clarity.
Yeah, and that way they're all using. That's what's called the Uniform Law Commission. It's so that they all are using the same language, so that somebody calls a wallet and goes to one website and reads a definition versus going to another website and maybe they're thinking of terms slightly differently, and you don't want to leave. And law is up to interpretation already. So having multiple definitions of things would just make things a whole lot worse.
Right.
So it's not about necessarily that there shouldn't be laws at all, or that there should be too many laws, but they're gonna come.
It's part of
it's
life.
Inevitable, right? Like once people who make laws find out about things, they're gonna make laws about them. So it's coming regardless of whether we want to or not. The best thing we can do is try to help educate those people so that they don't make them so that they screw things up for people,
right?
Or make it more difficult for business operators. So one of the big things like BitGo, who's a big multi-sig wallet creator, they are not considered a money transmitter because they don't technically have full control over the keys. It's a multi-sig, right? So they've been like an exception from that kind of needing to get a money transmission license.
Did they do that on purpose? Was that part of the structure? They made the business structure like that?
Well,
in order to avoid?
No, I think it was
incidental.
I think it was they needed to create the multi-sig so that people had the ability to not run off with money, right?
Oh, okay.
And they basically were saying our technology that provides the solution for people to have multi-sig wallets doesn't mean that we should be regulated as a money transmission or need money transmission licensing for that.
Right.
So helping, understand the different laws that are going to be coming out and voicing your opinions to those things has led to working with the California Financial Crimes Investigators Association, which I did a talk at their annual conference this year, which brings together bankers and law enforcement, everything from like DOJ to U.S. Marshals, Homeland Security, all these different groups who have heard of it, but they're not like in cyber task force and they don't know how it works, but they know that it's like touching their lives because they see
more
victims.
And more as time goes on.
Yeah, and I got a phone call from the Oxnard PD and Huntington Beach PD about 2 different cases involving a victim who had their laptop stolen and someone was trying to hack into their Coinbase account, right? And they're like, I don't know what any of this means.
Yeah, what does this mean? Yeah, how can they press charge? They don't even know what's going on, right?
They have no idea how any of it works or what the terms are or anything. So just bringing people up to speed so that they don't, one, either take the wrong action or stifle someone's creativity or innovation or legitimate business.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big concerns that I think, because I'm not a big, I don't like a lot of regulation, but if you do have the legislators getting involved, like you said, you want to make it so that you're helping innovation, not stifling it. And definitely if it's something where if you stifle innovation at all within the cryptocurrency space, you're talking about your whole region, whether it's country or state or what have you, could fall behind in an industry, an ecospace where every day counts, really. I mean, you can fall behind so quickly.
And you could be missing out on a huge economic impact for your jurisdiction.
I mean, the pie, you want your piece of the pie, and the pie is growing so fast that, you don't want to lose any piece of that pie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it sounds like, out of curiosity, it sounds like more and more of your clients are kind of regulatory agencies or law enforcement or, I guess, government-type entities. Would you say that's correct, or...
I wouldn't say that we're working with any of them like hand in hand yet, but I was contacted by some Serbian or a group here that works with diplomats from different countries, and there was a group visiting from Serbia who was in financial crimes, and one of them was a prosecutor, 2 of them are investigators, and they spoke very little English.
Right.
I had an interpreter.
Wow.
And we spoke for about 2 hours today. Actually, it was earlier today, and by the end of it, they actually understood like how Bitcoin worked.
Right.
And it said that they made it easier for them to understand how they can go about prosecuting.
Okay, got it.
Like they had a guy who in Serbia, he confessed to this major drug crime that involved Bitcoin. And they ended up having to let him go because the judge didn't understand like how crypto worked and there was no money involved, right?
Right. Well, I didn't see cash anywhere.
So they totally screwed it. And the guy said he walked away and he was like, you could tell he was just angry, right? That they had this big bust, but they couldn't prosecute the guy.
Right. So I wonder, do you know, was that a darknet market thing or was that in-person exchange in Bitcoin? Not sure.
No, I didn't ask the details.
I guess that's not too critical to it, but that is pretty interesting that you have people trying to figure out okay, what does this even mean? And to be honest, kind of like kudos to them to a certain extent, because I know a lot of people don't like regulators coming in, but if they are coming in, at least they're asking questions. At least they're not just dropping the hammer, making assumptions about, what someone is or is not guilty of, right? You want them at least becoming knowledgeable if they are going to regulate the space, right?
Yeah, and they're coming here wanting to learn, right? They feel like the U.S. is one of the leaders in this space. And if it's happened here, it's probably going to happen to them in the future, which means that the criminals are innovative here too.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they are. So I'm kind of curious, going forward, kind of what is the vision or the long-term strategy for your work at Coinstructive? From 5 years from now, what kind of work do you want to be doing? Is it along the same path that you are currently on?
So yes, I still want to be helping businesses become better businesses.
Right.
And I still want to be help educating people. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're building a training for law enforcement and banks that, through my work with the California Financial Crimes Investigators, has shown me what they really want to learn. So I'm working with Joe Ciccolo from BitAML, who is in the compliance space.
That's anti-money laundering, right?
Mm-hmm. So the whole know your customer, KYC, AML,
right.
anti-money laundering, and knowing where your funds are coming from. These are all things that are very important to traditional compliance people and wherever you kind of cross over into the fiat world. Mm-hmm. So these people are all kind of understanding that it's going to cross over at some point, and banks are wondering, well, how do I know if this is really suspicious, and should I file a report? Should I shut this guy's account down? Like, how do I know if this is illegal or not? And so we really just want to talk to them about, like, what is it they're seeing, how they can identify what is suspicious and what's not suspicious, and help them understand and ask the right questions to their customers before they just start shutting accounts off, right?
Right. So do these money transmitter types, do they see cryptocurrency as a threat, or just something they need to learn, or something that puts them into maybe not an existential threat, but maybe that puts them at more risk because of the quasi-anonymity of cryptocurrency?
Well, the risk, I think, is not only around – the risk is more around the anti-money laundering aspect.
Right. Their ability to comply with the laws.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Bank Secrecy Act is what they basically have to follow. And if they don't dot their I's and cross their T's appropriately, then heads start to roll and fines come out.
Yeah, they can get shut down too, right?
Yeah. And
in extreme cases.
It's bad for everybody. So, they're apprehensive to bank these businesses if that's what they're doing, because they're not savvy enough to really understand it. What they should be doing is saying, okay, it's a $100 billion, almost $200 billion market cap for all cryptos. Maybe if we want some more money on our balance, on our balance sheets, maybe we should look into banking some of these companies that are legitimate, if we can understand what's going on and their business use cases and how the money's flowing, because it's not going away. Yeah, so Silvergate Bank, right, is actually here in San Diego, and that might be somebody you should get on to talk one of these
I don't
days.
know much about Silverbank. They're just Silvergate, excuse me.
Yeah, Silvergate is a traditional bank, but they started getting into the crypto space a few years ago and have now been banking crypto businesses. So like the Gemini, like the Winklevoss exchange, their main bank, if you wire money, is Silvergate.
Nice.
So that's only because they've set up a compliance group that evaluates and goes through these companies.
They're doing their diligence.
Yeah. And it's like, so that's, if you think about it, the only thing that keeps people from doing things is lack of knowledge and confidence.
Right.
So if you build a team that has confidence and an understanding, then why wouldn't you want to go after that market?
Right. And I would have to think that the regulators, when they see that you have, what would I call it, dedicated a team to it, they're probably they're going to be a little bit more not lax, but they'll be a little bit more understanding if maybe you don't do things perfectly, because, hey, you have dedicated resources to it. You would think, right?
Yeah, I think that it gives them a industry lead in how to go about deciding whether or not you bank a crypto business. right? They have a certain set of guidelines that they're going to follow and make sure that the company meets these criteria. And if they do, great. If not, they're going to just turn you away. And they may not even give you a reason why. They just say your business is too risky and we don't want to bank you. And, that's their right. But they can only do so much. And I think that there's a lot of banks out there that could really take advantage of being able to help bank some of these businesses that are doing legitimate businesses. It's just that people don't understand how crypto works, and
they're scared to take the risk sometimes. Like you said, sometimes it's just a confidence issue.
Yeah, well, and a jail and a fine issue too, right?
Right.
So, but overall, I would say that the best thing about helping those people is that once you start to see, it's just like when you talk to the regular person and you see the light bulb go off in their head, and you go, they're like, oh, I get it now, and they start to go, all right, maybe I should start to look at this in a different light and treat it not as something bad. Everyone's first instinct is Bitcoin is used for illegal stuff, and that's it. That's bottom line. It's drug users and gangs and money launderers and organized crime and human trafficking, like all kinds of really bad things. And a lot of times, there's $5 billion worth of crypto and Bitcoin traded a day.
Yeah. Just
through exchanges, legitimate exchanges. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just people need to not hear only the things that are said in mainstream media.
Yeah, and I feel like at this point, something like Bitcoin is not. There was a certain point back 2011, 2012 when maybe I don't know if I could say the majority of use of cryptocurrency or of Bitcoin was something illicit, but certainly it was a big chunk. But as time goes on, it seems like that chunk is just becoming much, much smaller, especially for Bitcoin now.
Well, if you think about, in general, just how people are, the more people that we have around, the more likelihood that some of them are going to be doing bad things. And just like there's a dark web, I mean, not everybody goes in the dark web, right?
I wouldn't know what this dark web is that you talk about. I've never heard of it. But
there's a huge portion of the people in the world who don't ever even try to access the dark web.
Right.
And so what is that percentage? Is it 0.1% of all people? Is it 0.01% of all people who use or get on the dark web? And is that going to be how illicit activity with Bitcoin is going to be in the future, right?
Right.
It's a small percentage because you can't get rid of those bad people that are going to be doing, selling drugs or
and you don't want to be
guns.
You don't want to be tossing out the baby with the bathwater either, right? Especially when the baby's to keep on pushing the metaphor. The baby's a very humongous part, right?
Well, and yes, it is. But some of the things too, like illicit activity around drugs, may not be what you're thinking. It could be that someone can't get a prescription that they need.
Right. They're in a place where it actually is something useful and they can't get it, or it's too expensive unless they import it, I think is another big one as well. Especially, you would think more people would understand that since healthcare, healthcare costs in the United States are off the charts, but I don't hear too many people clamoring for, okay, well, let's open up the borders and let people import their medications. When they hear about the Silk Road or other darknet markets, they definitely recoil, and their assumption is just that, you got the dirty heroin dealers doing. And to be fair, there are more. I'm seeing more and more use cases that are good use cases for cryptocurrency as the space matures.
It is something that can help a lot of lives in a lot of different ways, and we shouldn't put too much negativity on it just because of what we hear in the press.
Yeah, so one thing that you mentioned earlier that really struck a chord with me was you were talking about how cryptocurrency, you think it can be used. Some of the applications that you can use it for are that you can use it essentially to bring truth, or you can help. I'm trying to think what the term, to essentially to help people, to make things better, to, like I said, to bring truth and transparency to things. And one of the reasons I used to actually do construction management at some point. I went to school for civil engineering, was just bored to death. And I found out that I really people would always come to me with their computer problems, and I found that computers were kind of my passion. So what really got me to push into software engineering and writing code was that I wanted to make applications that had algorithms where I could kind of calculate, I could help with, I guess you would call it like reputation systems, which you kind of see it on, I'm trying to think, there are some applications for it that are already used, especially the ones that come to mind are something like vendors on Amazon or eBay. And so I've even told my coworkers to be on the lookout for reputation systems where blockchain technology is being used. And there are some applications, I don't know if they're quite as mature as they need to be, but it is interesting hearing, because there are a lot of people that come in just for the money. And granted, it's nice to be in an industry that's growing and where there's plenty of money to be made, but we should keep in mind that we can also make money by actually improving the lives of others and improving the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
So would you say is that kind of your mission statement over at Coinstructive, is trying to consult and find, I guess, healthy applications for blockchain technology?
Yes, we want to weed through the muck and find good use cases and work with people who want to build things in an ethical, sociological or responsible way. And this is the perfect environment for that. I think you see a lot of people who want to make change, and if they're only about the money, it's very apparent after spending a few, maybe an hour with somebody about where their focus really is.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and start closing down the interview. But for the listeners out there who are hearing about your work at Coinstructive, even maybe some of the people who might be visiting San Diego want to find out more about the meetup. So where can they find out more about your work at Coinstructive, more about you in general, if they want to follow you on Twitter? Where can they find you?
So you can find Coinstructive. We have our own Facebook page. We are on Instagram and Twitter as well, at Coinstructive. And we have a website, coinstructive.com. You can go there. You can talk to us. You can reach out through our website. You can contact us through Twitter. You can contact me directly through Twitter or Facebook. Happy to talk with you about your projects. We've evaluated a lot of things. We turned down a lot of things because I see right now that with this new influx of projects through the ICO space, that there's some really good ones and there's some god-awful ones that should not even be attempting to do what they're trying to do. And
a lot of those.
Yeah, a lot of those, the majority of them. And we're going to see the same thing that we saw in 2014. People are going to be left holding the bags, and there's going to be a lot of people who get burned, but a lot of people are going to wise up. And they're going to learn a lot, and it's going to make the environment grow that much more quickly. So it's healthy. It's healthy in the regard that it is making people wake up, right? It's causing them to really pay attention to like their currency, their money.
I'd say they have incentive because they're talking about their money. Their money is being impacted. So it's such a great way to get people to kind of, I'm not going to say wake up, but to become more knowledgeable of what's going on around them, how finance works, because they can make money while they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can make money while you sleep, right? That's the great thing about crypto is it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's sometimes you just want to go back to sleep. Usually you're good though. You do a little dance when you wake up. So as I mentioned before, Chris is definitely an upstanding part of our community here in San Diego. So if you're ever in the area, definitely check out one of the meetups, or even contact Chris if you want to talk to him about his Coinstructive business. He's definitely someone that plenty of us here at Edge and at the meetups can absolutely vouch for. He's a very hard worker, very knowledgeable, and his heart's in the right place. So Chris, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Kylan.